Commander Grachthel's massive green hands gripped the energy shackles around his wrists, the blue plasma coursing through the restraints with each attempt to break free. The Orc's tusks gleamed in the artificial light of the mining station's detention bay, his yellow eyes burning with barely contained fury. For 3 centuries, his people had served the intergalactic empire as slave laborers, their incredible strength exploited to harvest solar energy crystals from the deadly corona of dying stars. "Still fighting the inevitable, beast?" sneered Captain Valdris, the human overseer whose pale features were scarred by years of commanding Orc work crews. His pristine imperial uniform bore the golden insignia of the Solar Extraction Corps, a symbol that had become synonymous with oppression across the Outer Rim worlds. Grachthel's response was a low growl that reverberated through the metal walls. "The inevitable, human, is your empire's fall. We are not beasts. We are warriors who have forgotten our strength." The detention bay of Mining Station Omega-7 housed dozens of Orc workers, their massive frames cramped into spaces designed for smaller humanoid species. The station itself was a marvel of imperial engineering, a massive structure that could maneuver close to stellar coronas and extract the high-energy particles that powered the Empire's vast fleet. But for the Orcs who operated the extraction equipment, it was a prison among the stars. Grachthel had been different from his fellow Orcs since childhood. Born on the industrial world of Mordugal, he had been raised in the shadow of the great foundries where his people forged the Empire's weapons and warships. Unlike his brethren, who had been conditioned to accept their fate, Grachthel possessed an intellect that matched his physical prowess. He had learned to read Imperial Standard, studied their military tactics, and most importantly, he had never forgotten the old stories of the Orc homeworld. The homeworld that the Empire claimed never existed. "You speak of warriors," Valdris continued, activating a neural compliance rod that sent waves of agony through the nearest Orc prisoners. "But I see only cattle. Useful cattle, but cattle nonetheless." As the other Orcs writhed in pain, Grachthel's mind was elsewhere. 3 days ago, during a routine solar extraction operation, he had intercepted a coded transmission from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. The message was fragmented, but its implications were staggering. A group of Orc refugees had discovered something in the Dark World sector, something that would change everything. The Dark World sector was a region of space the Empire had declared off-limits to all but the highest-ranking officials. It was said to contain nothing but dead planets and cosmic anomalies, but Grachthel suspected otherwise. The Empire was too careful about guarding empty space. "Valdris!" A new voice called from the detention bay's entrance. Lieutenant Kessler, the station's communications officer, stood nervously holding a data pad. "We're receiving priority orders from the Dreadnought's supremacy. They want all our shipments redirected to the Vega system immediately." Captain Valdris frowned. "The Vega system? That's nowhere near the primary supply routes. What's the meaning of this?" I don't know, sir. The orders came directly from Admiral Thorne himself. He's requesting maximum solar energy crystal production to fuel what he's calling Project Resurrection." Grachthel's ears perked up at the mention of Project Resurrection. During his years of servitude, he had learned to pick up fragments of information from careless Imperial personnel. Project Resurrection was rumored to be connected to the Empire's expansion into previously forbidden sectors of space. "Double the work shifts," Valdris ordered. "I want every Orc mining crew working around the clock. If Admiral Thorne wants crystals, we'll give him crystals." As the detention bay emptied of Imperial personnel, Grachthel turned to his fellow prisoners. These were not just laborers, but skilled warriors who had been broken by years of servitude. Among them was Thorgrim Ironhide, once a captain in the Orc resistance before his capture, and Zara Bloodfawn, a former engineer who had helped design the weapons that defended their conquered worlds. "Brothers and sisters," Grachthel whispered, his voice carrying the authority of command despite his chains. "The time for waiting is over. The Empire moves its pieces for some great game, and we will no longer be their pawns." Thorgrim's scarred face turned toward him. "Bold words, Grachthel. But these shackles are not mere metal. They're quantum locked to our neural patterns. Even if we could break free, the station's security systems would vaporize us before we reached the command deck. Then we don't break free, Gracthal replied, his yellow eyes gleaming with cunning. We make them release us willingly. The next morning, Gracthal was assigned to Extraction Bay 7, where the station's massive solar collectors focused stellar energy into crystalline matrices. The work was dangerous. A single miscalculation could result in a solar flare that would incinerate everything within a kilometer radius. But it was also the perfect opportunity to implement his plan. Among the Orc work crew was Brock Stormhammer, a former entertainer who had performed in the Empire's comic stations, orbital platforms where conquered species were forced to perform degrading shows for Imperial amusement. Brock's humor had always been dark, but his ability to imitate Imperial accents and mannerisms made him invaluable to Gracthal's scheme. Remember, Gracthal murmured as they began their shift. When the solar flare warning sounds, you know what to do. Brock nodded, his usually jovial expression serious. I've been practicing Captain Valdris's speech patterns. I can fool the automated systems long enough to get us to the communications array. The extraction process began at dawn, ship time. Massive collectors the size of city blocks rotated to face the nearby star, their surfaces lined with millions of focusing crystals. As the solar energy poured in, the Orcs operated the conversion equipment that transformed raw stellar power into the refined crystals that fueled Imperial warships. Gracthal worked with practiced efficiency, but his mind was on the encrypted message he had received. The transmission had come from a source identifying itself as the Last Clan, a group of Orcs who claimed to have escaped the Empire's conquest and established a hidden settlement in the Dark World sector. According to the message, they had found something on a dead world called Kethmora, something that would prove the Empire's greatest lie. The Orcs were not primitive savages who had been civilized by Imperial conquest. They were the descendants of an ancient civilization that had once rivaled the Empire itself. Flare spike detected in Sector 7, announced the station's AI. All personnel prepare for emergency protocols. This was the moment Gracthal had been waiting for. As the automated systems began their safety shutdown, he triggered a feedback loop in the extraction matrix. The resulting energy surge would appear to be a natural solar flare, but it would also overload the station's power grid long enough for his plan to work. Alarms blared throughout the station as the lights flickered and died. In the confusion, Brock slipped away from the work detail and made his way to the nearest communications terminal. Using his perfect imitation of Captain Valdris's voice, he activated the emergency protocols that would unlock the detention bay doors. "This is Captain Valdris," Brock's voice echoed through the station's speakers. "All security teams report to the solar collectors. We have a critical containment breach. Release all work crews for emergency evacuation procedures." The automated systems, following their programming, immediately unlocked the energy shackles throughout the station. For the first time in years, the Orcs felt the full strength of their limbs without the constant drain of the restraints. Gracthal's plan had worked perfectly, almost too perfectly. As he made his way through the station's corridors, he realized that the Imperial personnel were reacting with unusual speed and coordination. They had been prepared for this possibility. "It's a trap," he muttered, just as blast doors slammed shut around him. Captain Valdris's voice echoed through the emergency speakers, but this time it was genuine. "Did you really think we hadn't noticed your little signals, beast? We've been monitoring your communications for weeks. Admiral Thorne has been very interested in your contact with the so-called Last Clan." Gracthal found himself sealed in a corridor with a dozen other Orcs, but instead of despair, he felt a surge of hope. If the Empire had been monitoring their communications, then they knew about the Dark World sector. And if they knew about it, then the secrets the Last Clan had discovered were real. "Thorgrim," he called to his old friend. "How well do you remember the layout of Imperial mining stations?" "Well enough," the scarred Orc replied. "Why?" "Because we're not trying to escape this station. We're going to steal it." The revelation that the Empire had been monitoring their communications only strengthened Gracthal's resolve. As the security teams moved to contain the Orc uprising, He led his fellow prisoners through the station's maintenance shafts toward the reactor core. Mining Station Omega-7 was more than just an extraction facility. It was a mobile fortress capable of independent space flight. The reactor core is heavily shielded, Zara Bloodfang reported as they crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnels. But if we can access the primary control systems, we can override the safety protocols. Gracthel's plan was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than fighting their way through the station's defenses, they would turn the station itself into a weapon. The massive solar collectors that harvested stellar energy could be reconfigured to focus that power into a devastating beam capable of destroying Imperial warships. There, Thorgrim pointed to a maintenance hatch that led directly into the reactor chamber. But the radiation levels will be lethal for anyone not wearing protective gear. Not for us, Gracthel replied grimly. The same genetic modifications that make us ideal for solar extraction work also give us resistance to radiation. The Empire's gift to our people will be their undoing. As they entered the reactor chamber, the full scale of Imperial technology became apparent. The reactor core was a miniature sun, contained within layers of magnetic fields and quantum barriers. The energy it produced was channeled through crystalline conduits that ran throughout the station like a vast nervous system. Zara immediately went to work on the control systems, her engineers' training allowing her to navigate the complex interface with practiced ease. I can reroute the power flow to the collectors, she reported, but we'll need to physically realign the focusing arrays. Leave that to us, Gracthel said, gesturing to the other orcs. We've spent years operating those systems. We know them better than their designers. As the orcs worked to implement their plan, Captain Valdris was coordinating the Imperial response from the command deck. The station's security forces had been reinforced by a squad of Imperial Marines, elite soldiers trained specifically for dealing with alien uprisings. Sir, Lieutenant Kessler reported, we're detecting massive power fluctuations in the reactor core. The Orcs have somehow accessed the primary control systems. Impossible, Valdris snarled. Those systems are protected by quantum encryption. No Orc has the intelligence to bypass Imperial security protocols. Nevertheless, sir, they're systematically overriding our safety measures. At this rate, they'll have complete control of the station within the hour. Valdris activated his personal communicator, sending an encrypted message to the Imperial fleet. This is Mining Station Omega-7 requesting immediate military support. We have a Level 5 containment breach. Authorization code Crimson Dawn. The response came within minutes. Station Omega-7, this is Dreadnought Supremacy. Admiral Thorn is en route with a full battle group. Hold your position at all costs. But Gracthel had no intention of waiting for Imperial reinforcements. As the solar collectors slowly rotated to face the station's own command deck, he opened a communication channel to broadcast throughout the Imperial fleet. I am Commander Gracthel of the Free Orc Resistance. His voice echoed across subspace frequencies. For 3 centuries, my people have served your empire as slaves. We have built your ships, mined your crystals, and died in your wars. But we are slaves no more. The massive solar collectors, designed to harvest energy from the hearts of stars, now focused their power into a concentrated beam that could melt through the hulls of Imperial warships. The first target was the patrol cruiser Intimidator, whose crew barely had time to register the attack before their ship was vaporized by concentrated stellar energy. This is our declaration of war. Gracthel continued his broadcast. We know the truth about our people, about our history, and about the crimes the Empire has committed. The Dark World sector holds the proof of your lies, and we will claim it. As the station's weapons turned toward the next Imperial vessel, Gracthel felt the first stirrings of hope he had experienced in years. The Orc rebellion had begun, and with it, the first real challenge to Imperial supremacy in generations. Admiral Thorn's battle group arrived at Mining Station Omega-7 to find a scene of unprecedented devastation. 3 Imperial cruisers had been destroyed, their wreckage floating in the void like monuments to Orc defiance. The station itself had been transformed into a mobile fortress, its solar collectors now serving as weapons of war. Sir, reported Captain Stryker from the bridge of the Dreadnought's Supremacy. The Orcs have somehow converted the mining station into a combat vessel. Our tactical analysis suggests they've increased the station's offensive capabilities by 300%. Admiral Thorne was a veteran of countless campaigns across the galaxy, but he had never encountered anything like this. The Orcs were supposed to be primitive laborers, incapable of sophisticated military thinking. Yet somehow, they had not only staged a successful rebellion but had also demonstrated tactical brilliance that rivaled the Empire's best strategists. "Open a channel to the station," Thorne ordered. "I want to speak to their leader." Gracthel's image appeared on the main view screen, his massive frame dominating the display. Despite his chains and scars, he carried himself with the bearing of a true commander. "Admiral Thorne," he said with mock courtesy, "I've heard so much about you. The butcher of Proxima 7, the architect of the Centauri massacres. Your reputation precedes you. I prefer to think of myself as a patriot," Thorne replied coldly. "Just as you are a terrorist and a murderer. Surrender now, and I'll ensure your people receive a quick death." "Death?" Gracthel laughed, a sound that sent chills through the Imperial crew. "Admiral, death is what we've been living for centuries. What we offer you is something far more valuable, the truth." The main view screen shifted to display a star chart of the Dark World sector. The region was marked with Imperial no-fly zones and quarantine beacons, but Gracthel's data showed something else entirely: the location of dozens of ancient Orc settlements, thriving worlds that had been systematically hidden from Imperial records. "The Dark World sector isn't empty, Admiral. It's home to the last free Orcs in the galaxy. And on the world you call Kethmora, we've found proof that will bring down your entire empire." Thorne's face remained impassive, but Gracthel could see the concern in his eyes. "What proof? What fantasy have you concocted to justify your rebellion? The proof that Orcs didn't need to be civilized by the Empire. The proof that we had faster-than-light travel, quantum computers, and stellar engineering long before humans crawled out of their caves. The proof that your entire colonial project is built on a lie." The implications were staggering. If the Empire's justification for Orc slavery was false, then the moral foundation of Imperial rule would collapse. Dozens of subject species would rise in rebellion, and the carefully maintained balance of power would shatter. "Even if your claims were true," Thorne said, "it changes nothing. The Empire's strength doesn't come from moral authority. It comes from superior firepower. Surrender now, or watch your people burn." Gracthel's response was to order the station's weapons to fire. The concentrated solar beam lanced out toward the Dreadnought's Supremacy, but Thorne was ready. The massive warship's shields absorbed the attack, though the energy discharge was powerful enough to overload several secondary systems. "All ships engage the station," Thorne ordered. "I want that floating scrap heap reduced to atoms." The battle that followed was unlike anything in Imperial history. The Orcs fought with a ferocity that matched their desperation, using their intimate knowledge of the station's systems to maximum advantage. They had converted the mining equipment into weapons, turning their processors into missile launchers and extraction beams into cutting lasers. But despite their courage and ingenuity, the Orcs were vastly outnumbered. The Imperial battle group consisted of 2 dreadnoughts, 6 cruisers, and a dozen smaller vessels. Their combined firepower was enough to destroy entire worlds. "Sir," reported the tactical officer, "the station's shields are failing. We should be able to breach their defenses within the hour." But Gracthel had one final card to play. Deep in the station's core, Zara Bloodfawn was working frantically to implement a plan that would ensure their message reached the Dark World sector. She had rigged the reactor to overload, creating a subspace pulse that would carry their story across the galaxy. "Gracthel," she called through the communication system, "the cascade is ready. But once I trigger it, we'll have less than 10 minutes before the core goes critical." "Do it," Gracthel replied without hesitation. "Let the galaxy know that the Orcs died as warriors, not as slaves." The subspace pulse erupted from the station's core, carrying with it everything the Orcs had learned about their true history. The signal spread across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds, reaching Orc settlements on 1,000 worlds. More importantly, it reached the Dark World sector and the hidden civilization that waited there. As the station's hull began to buckle under Imperial fire, Gracthal stood on the command deck and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, his people were learning the truth. The rebellion had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The destruction of Mining Station Omega-7 sent shockwaves throughout the intergalactic empire. For the first time in centuries, a group of Orcs slaves had not only successfully rebelled against their masters but had also broadcast their story across the galaxy. The subspace pulse carried more than just data, it carried hope. On the industrial world of Mordugal, Orc workers in the great foundries began to whisper among themselves. The old stories their grandparents had told them, the legends of Orc heroes and ancient kingdoms, suddenly seemed less like fairy tales and more like forgotten history. Admiral Thorn stood in the wreckage of what had once been Mining Station Omega-7, his tactical team analyzing the debris for any clues about the Orcs' true capabilities. What they found was disturbing, evidence of technological sophistication that far exceeded anything the Empire had expected from their slaves. "Sir," reported Chief Engineer Nakamura, "the modifications they made to the station's systems are remarkable. They didn't just jury-rig some mining equipment, they fundamentally redesigned the entire power distribution network. This level of engineering requires advanced education and training. Which means they've been hiding their true capabilities for generations," Thorn mused. "The question is, what else have they been hiding?" The answer came in the form of a priority message from Imperial Intelligence. Director Carling's face appeared on the emergency channel, her expression grim. "Admiral, we have a problem. The Orc broadcast has triggered uprisings on 17 worlds. But more importantly, our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures in the Dark World sector." "What kind of energy signatures?" "The kind that suggests a major civilization." "Admiral, I think the Orcs were telling the truth about their hidden settlements. And if they are, then Project Resurrection becomes more critical than ever." Project Resurrection, the Empire's most classified operation. Even Thorn knew only fragments of the plan, but he understood enough to realize its importance. The Empire had been secretly developing a new generation of warships, vessels powerful enough to suppress any rebellion regardless of its scale. "Director, how long before the prototype fleet is operational?" 3 months, assuming we can maintain our current production schedule. "But Admiral, we're going to need every solar energy crystal we can get. The power requirements for the new vessels are astronomical." Thorn nodded grimly. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Empire would need Orc labor to build the weapons that would be used to suppress the Orc rebellion. But first, they needed to deal with the immediate crisis. "I want a full military survey of the Dark World sector," he ordered. "If there really is a hidden Orc civilization out there, we need to know its capabilities before they can organize a coordinated resistance." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the survivors of Mining Station Omega-7 were not quite as dead as the Empire believed. Gracthal had managed to evacuate a small group of Orcs in a maintenance shuttle just before the station's destruction. They were now making their way toward the Dark World sector, following the coordinates that had been hidden in the original message from the last clan. "The jump drive is functioning, but barely," reported Zara Bloodfong from the shuttle's cramped engineering compartment. "We have enough power for maybe 2 more hyperspace jumps before we're stranded." "Then we'd better make them count," Gracthal replied, studying the star charts on the shuttle's navigation display. "According to these coordinates, the last clan's base is located on the 3rd planet of the Kethmora system. But the Imperial charts show that system as empty space." "Maybe that's the point," suggested Thorgrim. "If the Empire has been systematically hiding the existence of Orc worlds, then their star charts would be deliberately falsified." As they prepared for their final jump, Gracthal reflected on the events of the past few days. The rebellion had begun, but it was far from over. The Empire's response would be swift and brutal, and the Orcs would need every advantage they could get. The secret of the Dark World sector wasn't just about hidden Orc settlements. It was about the truth of what the Orcs had been before the Empire's conquest. And if that truth was as revolutionary as Gracthal suspected, then it might be the key to not just Orc freedom, but to the liberation of all the Empire's subject species. Jump in 3, 2, 1. The shuttle disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with it the hopes of an entire species. Behind them, the Imperial fleet was already mobilizing for war. The greatest conflict in galactic history was about to begin. The Kethmora system materialized around the shuttle like a vision from another age. Instead of the empty space shown on Imperial charts, Gracthal and his companions found themselves looking at a thriving star system with 3 inhabited worlds and a network of orbital stations that dwarfed anything in the Empire's fleet. "By the ancient gods," whispered Thorgrim, his scarred face pressed against the viewport. "It's beautiful." The third planet of the system was a world of green forests and blue oceans, its surface unmarked by the industrial complexes that characterized Imperial worlds. But it was the orbital installations that truly took Gracthal's breath away. Massive structures that seemed to be grown rather than built, their organic curves and flowing lines distinctly Orc in design. "Incoming transmission," announced Zara from the communications console. "They're speaking in Old Orc, the ceremonial language that was supposedly lost centuries ago." The voice that emerged from the speakers was warm and welcoming, but also carried the weight of ancient authority. "Welcome, children of the scattered clans. I am Matron Kethera of the last clan. We have been waiting for you." As their shuttle was guided to a landing bay within one of the orbital stations, Gracthal marveled at the technology around him. The docking clamps that secured their vessel were made of a material that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, yet was stronger than any metal he had encountered. The airlock opened to reveal a delegation of Orcs unlike any Gracthal had seen in his lifetime. They were tall and proud, their clothing woven from materials that seemed to shimmer with inner light. But most importantly, they were free from the chains, the fear, and the crushing oppression that had defined Orc existence under the Empire. Matron Kethera stepped forward, her ancient eyes filled with both sadness and hope. "You have suffered much, my children. The Empire's cruelty has left its mark on you all. But you are home now, and there is much we must discuss." As they were led through the station's corridors, Gracthal was amazed by what he saw. The walls were covered with murals depicting Orc history, not the sanitized version taught in Imperial schools, but the true story of a proud and ancient civilization. Here were Orc astronomers mapping the stars, Orc engineers building the first faster-than-light drives, and Orc warriors defending their worlds from the Empire's initial expansion. "This is the Hall of Memory," Kethera explained as they entered a vast chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light. "Here we have preserved the true history of our people, the knowledge that the Empire sought to destroy." Gracthal approached one of the crystals, and immediately felt a connection to the stored memories within. Images flooded his mind, the Orc homeworld before the conquest, vast cities that reached toward the stars, fleets of ships that explored the galaxy's far reaches. "We were explorers," he said in wonder. "Scientists, artists, builders. The Empire didn't civilize us, they destroyed our civilization." "Yes," Kethera replied sadly. "And they did it systematically, over the course of centuries. Every Orc world that showed signs of technological advancement was targeted for pacification. Every leader who spoke of our true heritage was eliminated. They rewrote our history and convinced us that we were primitive savages who should be grateful for Imperial rule." Thorgrim studied a mural that depicted the early days of Imperial expansion. "But how did you escape? How did the last clan survive when all the others were conquered?" "We didn't escape," Kethera said. "We hid. When it became clear that the Empire intended to destroy everything we had built, our greatest scientists and leaders gathered here in the Dark World sector. We used our most advanced technology to create a barrier around our worlds, making them invisible to Imperial sensors." "A cloaking field on a planetary scale?" Zara asked, her engineer's mind struggling to comprehend the implications. "Not just cloaking," Kethera replied. "We bent space itself around our worlds, creating a pocket of reality that exists parallel to normal space. To Imperial sensors, this region appears to be empty, a few dead worlds and some cosmic anomalies. But in reality it's the heart of the last free Orc civilization. She led them to a massive viewing port that looked out onto the planet below. Kethmora is our capital world, but it's only one of dozens of Orc worlds in the Dark World sector. We have a population of nearly 1 billion Orcs, all living free from Imperial oppression. The implications were staggering. If the last clan had managed to preserve Orc civilization for centuries, then they would have continued to advance technologically while the Empire's Orc slaves were kept in deliberate ignorance. What's our current technological level compared to the Empire? Gracthal asked. Kethera smiled, and for the first time, Gracthal saw the fire of ancient Orc pride in her eyes. Let me show you something that will answer your question. She led them to another section of the station, where a massive window looked out into space. As they watched, the stars began to move, not because they were moving, but because the station itself was in motion. This is the world ship Vengeance, Kethera explained. One of 12 such vessels that serve as the mobile capitals of the last clan. Each one is capable of destroying an entire Imperial fleet. The scale of the vessel became apparent as they watched smaller ships, each one larger than an Imperial cruiser, dock with the station. The world ship Vengeance was not just a space station, but a mobile planet, capable of supporting millions of inhabitants while traveling between star systems. But why haven't you acted against the Empire before now? Gracthal asked. With this level of technology, you could have liberated our people generations ago. Because, Kethera replied, we were not yet ready. The Empire's strength comes not just from their military might, but from their ability to control information. Even if we had freed every Orc slave in the galaxy, they would have had no knowledge of their true heritage. They would have been easy prey for Imperial reconquest. But that's changed now, Thorgrim observed. The broadcast from the mining station has awakened something in our people. They're starting to remember. Exactly, Kethera agreed. Your sacrifice has accomplished what we could not. It has planted the seeds of awakening in the minds of billions of Orc slaves. Now, for the first time in centuries, we have the opportunity to not just free our people, but to restore our civilization. As they spoke, alarms began to sound throughout the station. A young Orc officer rushed to Kethera's side, his face grave with urgency. Matron, our deep space sensors are detecting a massive Imperial fleet approaching the Dark World sector. They're moving in formation and appear to be conducting a systematic search. Kethera's expression hardened. So, Admiral Thorn has decided to investigate our little sanctuary. How many ships? Over 200 vessels, including several dreadnoughts and the new prototype warships from Project Resurrection. Gracthal felt a chill run down his spine. The Empire was bringing its full might to bear against the last clan, and even their advanced technology might not be enough to withstand such an assault. Then the time for hiding is over, Kethera declared. Signal the other world ships. The last clan goes to war.